internet has helped to decide the fates of several candidates in this federal election campaign so far. To name just a couple, New Democrat Dana Larson for taking drugs in a web video. Another, conservative Chris Reed, who was blogging about how women and gays should carry concealed weapons to avoid being victims of crime. Ken Chapman is watching all of this for Wildrose Country during this federal election campaign. He also writes for his own political blog, and he joins us now on the line. Hi, Ken.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How about you? Have you written anything lately that you could be sorry for later?
Oh, I wrote something during the provincial leadership that I'm terribly sorry for, and I was just, I've had that experience. I've been flamed in the blogosphere, and I deserved it, and I've learned my lesson.
You have, indeed. Well, what have you noticed this time around in this election campaign?
What's happening is there's a whole clear series of individual bloggers who are picking stuff up that the mainstream media isn't, and that's not a criticism of the mainstream media. It's just that there's a whole bunch more people looking at this stuff now and have a way of getting the information out. And what we're seeing is the candidates, it's not as if we didn't know this election was coming for the Conservatives, so I'm surprised that they have candidates that are being seen as being inappropriate and having to lose them. I can see that some other parties would be having to move very quickly, and as they can make a decision on a candidate and repent at their leisure, as some of them are doing. But it really brings up the question is, what's the role of political parties in picking these candidates, and how does that all work?
And what would you say it is? How far should it extend?
Well, political parties, I think in all political parties put together, there's only 3%, I think, of the population who is eligible to vote actually belongs to political parties. So if you want to have real influence and real leverage on that influence, you would join a political party because they actually, on a nomination process, select the candidates. But we see that there's a whole bunch of influence coming in from the leadership and from the central party organizations and apparatus on candidates, so that the local democracy may be a myth in many, many cases, and the leaders are taking strong influence on who those candidates are going to be by appointing them or making sure they do some nudge, nudge, wink, wink kind of influencing. And the parties are supposed to be vetting these people. Well, it's not the parties who vet these people. It's the central party organizations. In Harper's case, it would be his staff. And all the leaders have the same thing. But it's surprising how many candidates are slipping through this vetting process. I mean, really unqualified, inappropriate candidates.
But it does make you wonder, though. I mean, how far back can you go, and how? I mean, who would have ever thought to ask that one candidate in particular, who, for instance, took his clothes off in front of a group of 12-year-olds? I mean. Should there be a question on an application form about that? I mean, there is a question, is there?
Yeah, Donna, I understand. I haven't seen the questionnaire, but I understand that from the early days of the Reform Party and the Alliance, they were pretty embarrassed by some of their early candidates, and they developed a questionnaire and a vetting process that has like up to 200 questions that you don't have to answer, but if you want to be a candidate, you will. And I know all the other parties have a similar kind of vetting process. And you got to go back. In this world today, if it happened, it will be discovered. In the old days when the communications were much more traditional and much more channeled and streamlined in mainstream media, this stuff may have been discovered, but it would be just looked over.
Mm-hmm. But don't you think
in the viral, violent world of the blogosphere, it gets out there?
Yeah, well, and doesn't it, to a certain extent? I mean, I'm not commenting on the people who've already withdrawn their names, but wouldn't this new way of vetting candidates, I mean, out there on the internet, essentially, wouldn't that keep so many excellent people from throwing their name into the hat? Because who could really withstand one of these vetting processes online now?
Well, we do not get our best and our brightest people coming into politics because we mostly spend our time belittling them, and who would put themselves forward for that? But I think there is a small and significant indications of cultural change, and you're seeing it with Palin. She's, all her value systems, and she's got a teenage daughter who was pregnant before getting married. Now, that is, I'm not criticizing her for that. I don't have any problem with that. But you can see that there's a lot of people who have a nudge, nudge, wink, wink kind of problem with that. I think there's a accentuation of a cultural change. That's not as big a deal as it was been 15 or 20 years ago. you're seeing, I think it's ironic that, Elizabeth May says, I'm sorry, I never smoked marijuana. Where with Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton 15 years ago, oh my God, his excuse was he didn't inhale. Mm-hmm. I think we're getting an awful lot more understanding and accepting of the human foibles of people, and they just got to put them forward.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say would make for a legitimate reason to, for a political party to veto a candidate? I mean, we just heard in this hour from Dean Schock, who is running as an independent conservative in Medicine Hat, and he posted what he thinks is a very funny video to make a point. And at the end, it had a fake prosthetic rear end being kissed to try to make his point. I mean, is that the kind of thing that a mainstream party would veto in the future?
Well, in some mainstream parties would. I don't think an NDP party would veto that, and I don't think a Green Party would veto that, because they're much more progressive and liberal in their approaches. I mean, socially liberal in their approaches, not politically liberal. A conservative candidate may have an awful lot of trouble getting away with that. But, the issue is there's clearly some people who have broken the law, people who are flaunting the law, and, the marijuana smoking kind of fellow, he's making a point. And it's very difficult for Leighton to handle the marijuana smoking candidate when he's when he's been working with the marijuana party, mm-hmm. and he's also, their position is we want legalization. Well, is this civil disobedience in the Gandhi style, or is this just a publicity stunt that went bad?
Yeah,
I think it's the latter.
Yeah, and that's the question, because, of course, if people have not broken the law and things happened a long time ago, for instance, what should be the statute of limitations for these things? I mean, how do we judge what the public taste is?
There appears to be no statute of limitation in the court of public opinion.
You're right. If it happened, it's game over, right?
Or you better tell it happened at the front end and say you're going to notice this. You're going to talk about it. I want to talk about it now and put it away and put it to bed. And you do that publicly, and you let people know. But if you don't do that, you say I can slide this through and nobody's going to notice. Heck, it'll get noticed. And the fact that it goes into your own value sets, and can you be trusted to tell us the whole truth? And what kind of judgment you will make about really serious things if you've got bad judgment about these kinds of things?
Well, Ken, I hope you're not pulling your punches because you're worried about getting a few flamers there.
Well, no, it's when I did it, I deserved it, and it was a really stupid thing, but it was clever and cute. But I'll tell you, sarcasm and irony does not work in text on the internet.
Only better in person. Ken, it's great to...
Sarcasm and irony works well in person. It does not work in text on the internet. It gets misinterpreted, and that's what I learned.
Ken, it's great to have you with us as always. Thanks for joining us.
Good talking to you.
That's Ken Chapman. He's a political blogger. His website is ken-chapman.blogspot.com. What do you think about what he had to say today? Give our Wildrose Country Talkback line a call at 1-800-461-9219. That's 1-800-461-9219. Or send us an email to wildrose@cbc.ca.